I'd like to call the Saline City Council meeting to order. If you'd please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As always, if you're a guest this evening, if you'd please sign in the back, we would appreciate that. Members present this evening are myself, Mayor Marl, Council Members Burgoyne, Gearbaugh, Cybo Koenig, Rhodes, Roth, and Mayor Pro Tem Tahar. From City staff, we have City Manager Campbell, Clerk Royal, City Treasurer Bennett, and Police Chief Rennick. At this time, I would seek a motion to approve the agenda as amended. There's going to be a few changes this evening. One is Mr. Burgoyne would like to add an item to the discussion portion of our agenda following reports and other announcements. We'll title that Resident Feedback. And then I'll let him make the motion, make the appropriate motion when we get to it, but he's going to ask that 2 items be removed from the consent agenda as well. So unless there are additional changes to the agenda this evening, I would seek a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Rhodes, seconded by Councilmember Gearbaugh. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. There are no absences this evening, so we'll dispense with that, and there are no presentations this evening. So we move on to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address, for the record. Are there any citizen comments on agenda items? Please.
Good evening. I'm Paul Gargosian from Brecken Grill here in Saline. I wanted to talk about the parking restrictions and traffic control orders that's on the agenda for today. My concern a little bit is that there's a problem in some areas of Saline, and everybody else in Saline is going to get labeled and punished for it. If you walk around Saline every day, when I walk into the back parking lot behind Brecken Grill and Benny's, during the day, there's plenty of parking spots. I feel that putting a 4-hour limit as what's proposed for that, we're telling people you can come to our town during the day for 4 hours only, then you have to find someplace else to go. Because no one's going to go back to their car after 4 hours and move it to a different lot and continue to hang out in our town. Other towns similar to Saline, Dexter, Chelsea, are still at that point of free parking, just like we have. I know that they have restrictions on their parking, but again, it's the suggestion of you cannot park here for more than 3 hours, 4 hours, that gets people aware of what's going on. I think what the major issue here in town is the employees of our businesses, and that is us training our employees or requiring them to park into an additional lot. With the growth of Saline, if the city is not providing new parking, then what's going to happen is the problem's going to get worse. People are not going to come to our town if they can't find a place to park. And if it's during the day that there's the issue in some other lots, 4 hours, people are going to go find another town to shop at, like I said. Coming up on this winter, the way that the city of Saline takes care of the lots, they pile up snow in some of the parking spots. So you're going to have less parking spots because of that. Preparing for 2016 when they tear up Michigan Ave, if we start getting people to have different habits of going to different towns, it's going to become a major issue in 2016 to try to get them here as well. I don't think that it's welcoming to our town and to any business employees to come to our town if they have a restriction on how long they can park. Over the last 12 years, I've received plenty of grief for some things that I would want in my business and in the city. Now it's my turn to give it back to you a little bit. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul.
Yep.
Appreciate your comments. Are there additional comments on agenda items? No? Then we'll move on to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion. And Mr. Burgoyne, if I'm correct, you wanted to remove A and E from consent agenda item C-14-124?
Yes.
Okay. So that'll be the first item under new business.
So I'd like to move the consent agenda with those items removed.
Okay, so Mr. Burgoyne moves to approve the consent agenda as amended. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Councilmember Gearbaugh. If there are no additional changes to the consent agenda, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. So the first motion will be the additional motion. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 12th, 2014 memo from Deputy Treasurer McDonough regarding the first amended FY15 recreation bond budget and the first amended FY15 recreation complex budget, and to approve and adopt the first amended FY15 budget for recreation bond and recreation complex as submitted. Is there a motion? Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to acknowledge it.
Okay. Okay. Moved by Gearbaugh to acknowledge. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Roth. Mr. Burgoyne, did you have a question or comment, sir?
Well, my comment is that we have an established procedure for fund balance, which is that we'll maintain our fund balance between at least 15% and not over 20%. And in these budgets, it's not in line with that. The rec bond budget, for example, has, I think it's a 200%, 200-something percent. The recreation budget balance actually went up above our target. So I think when we adjust our budgets, it would be nice to adjust our budgets to our established voted policy.
Ms. Bennett, I know you didn't prepare the memorandums. Do you care to comment on that at all?
Absolutely. Well, the fund balance policy does state that we are going to try to maintain it between 50 and 20%, with the council taking action on any additional funds over the 20% and what they're to be allocated for. At this time, I believe the council is still entertaining the idea of retirement pension bonding and stuff like that. So we have not. I don't think we had exhausted exhausted our efforts as to what we were going to assign those additional fund balances for. We also need to have a discussion in reference to the fund balances that we have been reserving or restricting. And going forward, we need to have that discussion too. This was to get the amended budget going, and then there are some other discussions that we need to have. But as you are well aware, our work meeting budgets have been work meeting agendas have been pretty hefty, but we do have some other issues that we do need to discuss as a council needs to take action on those.
Yeah.
This is just the amendment at this time to adjust the fund balance to actual to reflect the audit and any changes that have occurred in the first quarter of this fiscal year, July, August, and September.
Anything further?
Well, in terms of the rec bond, I think there are something like 7 years left or 6 years left of that rec bond. And it would seem appropriate to allocate some amount each year to it. In terms, and I do understand and agree with the treasurer's comments. I think that's fine to consider it, duly considered at some time. I'm just bringing it up.
Sure. Okay. Very good. Mr. Gearbaugh, did you have a comment or question, sir?
Yeah, just sort of related to this. I was wondering when we're going to actually get an overview of what's happened in terms of the rec center as a result of all our changes, including memberships and all that. I thought we had something as of June 30th.
I actually just spoke to the city manager about that today and casually mentioned it to Director Scruggs following our strategic planning retreat on Friday evening, and I hope to have her on the agenda to report back sometime in December.
Okay.
That's the target.
Well, the only other question I had for the year-end balance that actually increased from what we originally budgeted, what is that all attributed to?
For which fund?
116,000.
You want to come to the podium, Ms. Bennett?
Are we still on recreation?
I believe so, yes.
I'm sorry, I was writing notes.
No, I'm sorry. We're just. Looks like we're moving our fund balance up $116,000. So we're just all this from what we originally budgeted. So
What caused that in the recreation? I believe in the recreation, we did have a large drive at the end of the fiscal year, membership drive, and we had a great impact on that. And she also had some expenses, some activities that she didn't pursue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Burgoyne?
Yeah, I would also comment that there was a structural change in the costs there because we had a $61,000 cost per year, which was ended last year. So that $61,000 of relief per year could have an effect on it too.
Very good. If there's nothing further, it's been properly moved by Gearboss, seconded by Roth, to acknowledge receipt of the November 12th memo from Deputy Treasurer McDonough regarding the two budgets. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Would someone like to offer a motion to approve and adopt the first amended FY15 budget for Recreation Bond and Recreation Complex as submitted?
Second.
Okay, actually, I'll get you on the next one, Mr. Burgoyne. I think it was Gearbaugh would be the mover and seconded by, was that Rhodes? Wonderful, okay. It's been properly moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by Rhodes to approve and to adopt. Is there any discussion? No, then we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to Part E, which is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 12th, 2014 memo from Deputy Treasurer McDonough regarding first amended FY15 general fund budget and to approve and adopt the first amended FY15 general fund budget as submitted.
Motion to acknowledge receipt and approve and adopt.
Okay, is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Councilwoman Cybo Koenig. Mr. Burgoyne, do you want to articulate whatever question or concern you have, sir?
That was the same issue, and
Okay.
she answered it.
Okay, very good. Anything further? No, that's been properly moved by Burgoyne, seconded by Cybo Koenig to acknowledge receipt and to approve and adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 14-229. This is parking restrictions and traffic control orders. This will be a motion, it's a series of two motions, excuse me. The first is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 4th, 2014 memo from Police Chief Rennick and to approve or not to approve the resolution to allow for multiple tickets to be issued to a vehicle which remains parked in violation of the ordinance and allows City Council to set fees by resolution in city parking lots. Is there a motion?
I'll move to acknowledge receipt and
Okay. It's been moved by Rhodes to acknowledge receipt and to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Burgoyne. Okay. Chief, do you want to comment on this? I know we've had many long and protracted discussions on this issue, but if you care to make any additional comment for the record, we'd appreciate that.
I think we discussed this last council meeting fairly much at length, and I guess I would just be open for any questions that you may have at this point.
Okay. Are there any questions? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Parking ticket on the first day, if you pay it within the first day, is $10. If you pay it within 14 days, it's $20, and after 14 days, it goes to $30.
Mr. Burgoyne?
My understanding is that the restrictions are going to be on the parking lot, which is behind the Presbyterian Church, which is called number 1. The parking lot that's behind Max Acadian Seafood, which is called number 3. And also behind Benny's Bakery, which is called number 2. Okay, it seems to me that...
That's 4, Mr. Burgoyne.
Oh, that's called 4.
And
Okay.
behind Max is 2. 2 is behind Max. 3 is across the street, south of Henry.
Oh, okay. Well, my understanding is that the restrictions will not apply south of Henry and will not apply on West McKay.
That's correct.
Well, it seems to me that I'm not sure that I agree that restrictions should happen behind Benny's Bakery because I agree that, you know, there's not that heavy a demand. The heavy, and in parking lot, whatever the number is, behind Comerica Bank, I don't think the demand is always that heavy because there's that overflow south of Henry Street. It seems to me that the heaviest demand we have is the parking lot behind the Chamber of Commerce, which I think is number 1. And we could resolve that simply by getting more parking. So I think we should move as quickly as possible and obtain parking behind the Presbyterian Church, obtain more parking. I think that's the best solution. This particular effort, I guess 4 hours in that parking lot could be okay for now, but I think the ultimate solution is to quickly get more parking.
Well, first of all, as I've articulated at previous meetings and discussions I've had throughout the community, I am wholeheartedly in support of acquiring additional parking for our downtown, especially when we come to terms with the fact that we have new businesses that are relocating to our downtown, and we hope to see our downtown grow and thrive and prosper in the years to come. I think it's absolutely true that we need additional parking. I don't know how feasible it is to acquire additional parking in that particular geographic region, Councilmember Burgoyne, where the Presbyterian Church is located. However, to your original point that you think perhaps we should just limit enforcement to the municipal lot behind the Presbyterian Church and Dan's, you are certainly free as any council member, as any other council member is, to offer an amendment to the motion if that's your wish. Mr. Rhodes?
Just seems to me that we've had multiple discussions over multiple weeks with multiple people, and the consensus of those various discussions seems to have resulted in this document that we have in front of us, and I think it's worthwhile moving forward with it. And if it is proven to not work after some period of time, we can always go back and revise it.
Anything further? Good with that? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Yeah, I
Okay.
agree with that. I've seen too many employees parking too close to the businesses and taking their smoke breaks and everything else that I think they should be doing it somewhere else, but not in their car right next to people expecting to park and walk as close as they can to a restaurant and such. So at this point, I think this is the way to go.
Okay. Anything further? I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Tahar.
Yes, so we have in parking lot number 2 and parking lot number 4, we have the option of otherwise regulating parking by signage. So is that, am I remembering correctly that those are the areas that are designated for longer parking with the idea in mind that employees would park in those areas?
I don't think there's a prohibition against an employee parking there unless the employer does not want them parking there, but it does allow for people to park longer than the 4 hours that we're suggesting in those 2 lots. That's correct.
Right.
And then parking lot number 1, there is a private parking lot where employees from like the chamber and stuff can park.
Right.
But that's
Okay.
not a city lot.
Okay, thanks.
Anything further?
Not for me, thanks.
No? Okay. Chief, one quick question, and if I missed it in your memorandum, excuse me. If I missed it in the memorandum dated November the 4th, I apologize. Assuming that this motion and the subsequent motion pass this evening, when does enforcement begin? Effective immediately?
It would be effective as soon as, I'm assuming it would be as soon as it was published. And that we would then notify our business owners that in fact, it would probably take a couple of weeks before it would actually happen. And then, of course, we're just moving into the snow season, so it may be a few weeks before that would actually kick in.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe, if I recall correctly, during the conversations, that question's come up a couple times. If I recall, the thought was that we would give between 3 or 4 weeks notice to downtown businesses to let them know ahead of time that as of a certain date, we will be enforcing.
I guess my preference, if I may, even though it extends that period by a couple weeks, I think it's easy just to say beginning effective January 2015. That's my opinion. Mayor Pro Tem Tahar?
I would also say, at a minimum, I would think we would want the new signs to be installed.
Correct.
Before we started enforcing.
Excuse me, yes. Mr. Burgoyne?
I was going to ask whether we had the signs.
Do you have any?
I talked to Director Fordyce, and he did not want to order them until council action. He said it would be a week to 2 before they would be made up, and then probably within a week, he could have those installed. So we're looking at 3 weeks before those signs actually probably go up.
So again, I think that January the 1st would be appropriate. Mr. Burgoyne?
Yeah, I'm persuaded to go along with trying this out.
Okay.
But I do think that it is possible to get parking in the northeast quadrant, and that should be pursued.
Is everyone comfortable with beginning enforcement January 1, considering the fact that we've got to first order the signs and then have them placed, and there's also an educational component to this? Mr. Roth, you're okay with that? Okay, okay. Yep, okay. Anything further on this?
I believe since the TCO is, it hasn't been signed yet, I could actually date the TCO and make it effective January 1st, so you wouldn't have to do that.
Yeah. If you're comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay. And the consensus, though, is clear, excuse me, that will begin January 1, of course, after the signs have been placed. Okay.
Yes.
All right, if there's nothing further, on motion A, it's been properly moved by Rhodes, seconded by Burgoyne, excuse me, to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to motion B, which will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 4th, 2014 memo from Police Chief Rennick, and to approve or not to approve the resolution which provides for the time limits for parking in the city lots, establishes a permit system for temporarily allowed vehicles to park for times longer than 24 hours in a lot, and includes a parking map of the 5 parking lots. Tongue twister, I apologize. Is there a motion to acknowledge receipt and to approve, or not to approve?
Move to acknowledge receipt and approve.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded again by Mr. Burgoyne. Discussion. Any discussion? That's easy enough.
Discussed it.
Yep, okay. Well, then again, it's been properly moved by Rhodes, seconded by Burgoyne to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Chief, before I let you go, because this is brought up multiple times from the dais tonight and in the past, can you maybe jot down on your calendar maybe 6 months from January 1, so that'd be about the 1st of June, to come back and to report on how things are progressing? And maybe at that time, we can also get some feedback from some local business owners.
Will do.
I think that would be appropriate to determine whether this course of action is good in perpetuity or whether we need to make some changes.
Okay. Thank
Very
you.
good. Very good. All right, we move on now to new business item 14-230. This is health insurance. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo dated November the 3rd, 2014 from City Manager Campbell, and to approve or not to approve the Employee Health Care Committee's recommendation and to continue with the 4 health plans as submitted.
Motion to acknowledge receipt and approve.
Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Ms. Seibel-Koenig. Mr. Campbell, do you want to discuss your memo briefly? And I should note for the public who is in attendance this evening or who may be watching this at home, we did have a work meeting on this last week, so council did discuss this issue extensively with a representative from Katnick Insurance, our local underwriter. So, Mr. Campbell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a little bit of history. We are an experience-rated organization as far as our health insurance. As we discussed with Kapnick at the work session, the mayor alluded to, you may recall, the city's received almost I guess an unprecedented second year in a row of reduction in premium costs. So, and that is due to limited or not having as many claims as Blue Cross Blue Shield had forecasted us to have. So that's a great thing. I think there's a lot of things that play into that, but of course one I think is we have a pretty solid wellness committee that puts on a number of teachings, lunch and learns as we call them. Actually, we have one tomorrow. But that has been helpful, as well as the health fair and that type of thing that we do. So we saw, for the renewal term, January 1st, 2015, excuse me, we saw an overall premium decrease of 6.65%, with an overall decrease factoring in the Affordable Care Act taxes of 5.8%, and as well as the Public Act 152 that sets limits on how much a public employer can pay for their employees' health care, for their health insurance. And so there's the hard cap, which is a set amount that they can pay, that the city can pay for their employees. And then there's also the 80/20. The last 3 years, I believe, we've had the hard cap, and we continue to recommend that. You also may recall the city has established a healthcare committee made up of our bargaining units as well as non-union staff and management, which was part of some collective bargaining negotiations to get those specific details out of the contracts and give them an opportunity to discuss options and the like, which I think has been very, very fruitful and productive the last couple of years. So that being said, with the reduction in costs, the committee's recommendation is to maintain the current programs that are being offered, the current plans, I should say. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for City Manager Campbell? Again, noting that we did discuss this exactly a week ago. No questions? Okay. All right, well, we'll transition then to statements. Mr. Gearbaugh, go ahead.
And as I mentioned at our work committee, I will not be supporting this tonight. This passed on the entire savings that we received, not the employees, no offense, but we still have outstanding liabilities for the retirement liability that is at 75%, which I just was very important to mention, that we're only funded to a 75% level. In addition, we raised taxes this past year in the attempt that those taxes would be poured towards other options and things that we needed. And as a result of this, it's being passed on directly to the employees. No offense, I don't have a problem maintaining this at what we were at last year, but we need to figure out ways how we're going to maintain. And this would have been one of those. And unfortunately, in addition to this, I'm not really seeing any other company that is passing on savings of these type of reductions to the employees. So I will not be supporting this. I think we should have done some type of cost sharing or split 50/50, 75/25, something that at this point, I think we're doing the longest justice on this. And yes, I know staff are going to review this, but we as council members are policymakers and we need to be doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Additional comments, Mr. Burgoyne?
Well, my comment is that the employees paid more in years where the experience showed higher usage and higher costs. And when the employees actually achieve lower usage and a lower cost burden to the city, I think it's fair for us to share the reduced costs in the same way that in bad years the employees shared the higher costs. So it's maintaining an equal relationship in if they happen to do well, it's more favorable for the employees and for the city. So the city's costs are also going down. The overall cost went down. So I don't mind being even-handed in both directions.
Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Are there additional comments? No additional comments, then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Burgoyne, seconded by Seibel Koenig to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Nay. The ayes have it. The motion carries. We'll proceed to new business item 14-231. This is reporting of CVTRS information to the Department of Treasury. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo dated November the 12th, 2014 from Deputy Treasurer McDonough and to approve or not to approve the accountability and transparency documents for the 2015 CVTRS and to authorize or not authorize the city manager to sign the documents on behalf of the city of Saline. Excuse me. Is there a motion?
Move to acknowledge receipt, to approve and authorize.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Tahar. Is there a second? Support by Councilmember Rhodes. Is this your item, Ms. Bennett? Do you care to comment on this?
As you may be aware, the CVTRS, which is abbreviation for City, Villages, Townships Revenue Sharing, replaces what was formerly known as EVIP from the state of Michigan. This one requirement changed our deadline from the October 1st, it was the first phase of EVIP, which is basically the transparency. So we will still need to disclose our transparency, and I think in the memo that Joanne prepared for you, she showed, the charts and stuff like that, which will also be displayed on our website. As you may recall, one of the other phases of EVIP, which is no longer going to be a requirement, but yet we still need to track it on our dashboard, is our consolidation of services and those services that we can continue to partner with other municipalities and things like that to save on costs. We will still need to disclose that on our dashboard, so that's still something that will be on our radar as a city that we'll be reporting. But this is basically just our it's like identical to the phase 1 of the EVIP, and we just moved the deadline.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Are there questions for our city treasurer? Mr. Rhodes?
I'd like to see this report given some prominence on our website and perhaps called something other than CVTRS, because residents are not going to know what that is, but it's great information and it needs to be readily available. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you.
Mr. Gearbaugh?
Is there any way to show the last fiscal year? I mean, it wasn't required by the state to do 2 fiscal years.
It's required, we show what's required by the state.
So they're not really interested in having the last fiscal year, nor would you have to.
I mean, they supposedly looked at all of that each year. We're just supposed to provide transparency for, what we're doing current. I think we keep our I mean, we could archive ours on the website.
No, I'm from the perspective, when you're looking at this information, you're listing 2013 and 2012, there's close in 2014.
Oh, I know, it's really hard to try to get people to go back and track this information.
Right, but it seems like even just doing, a year behind, so we don't have the current year information, we're already behind, people don't see what the other information is.
So I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood your comment. Is there a way that we can do this for our current year on our website?
Show our tie-in of 2014, 2013, so you at least have the most current fiscal year that we just closed, because I think using a year and a half data, that only is already kind of see, especially since we got all the changes. And on the last page, especially when we show the 6/30, 2015 general fund budget, and we don't show what we actually did in 2015.
We'll give her a shot.
Suggestion. I just wanted to know if the state's from the perspective that they don't want to know what happened just this last year, which it sounds like.
Right.
That's kind of just,
Well, it's their fiscal year versus our fiscal year type thing. Yeah.
so they're not used, but this is in
This
September.
is our,
Our fiscal year.
Theirs begins October 1.
right. So,
That's what I'm saying, it's kind of
Yeah.
a year behind.
oh, absolutely, I agree. Trying to go back and remember what we did back then and getting it all. We're never sure what year we're working in.
No, I just wanted to reaffirm that's kind of how the state works.
Right. Well, we'll see what we can create for it.
No, I don't want to put a significant effort, I just wanted to understand what you're doing, but it's, all of a sudden you look at this, we have FY15 budget, we're missing a year.
Mr. Burgoyne?
I think a subtitle of this is Citizen Guide to Finances, so maybe we could use something more natural like that.
Good suggestion. Mr. Rhodes?
I would agree with Councilmember Gerlach's comment, though, if it's possible to put our fiscal year 24, not a lot of undue effort, better than what the state is asking for.
Well, Joanne does all of this legwork, so I will pass it on to her.
Anything further?
I'll give credit where credit is due.
I appreciate that.
And throw rocks at me next time I walk by.
All right, if there's nothing further, it has been properly moved by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, seconded by Councilmember Rhodes to acknowledge receipt and to approve and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Well, in my opinion, the most exciting item of the night is our next new business item, which is item 14-232. This is a bond resolution. This will be a motion, and it does require a roll call vote to approve and adopt or not to adopt the resolution approving the resolution to authorize the issuance of general obligations limited tax refunding bonds, Series 2014, and to authorize or not authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign on behalf of the city of Saline.
Motion to approve and adopt and authorize.
Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar. Again, we discussed this item last week at length at a work meeting, but Treasurer Bennett or City Manager Campbell, do you care to comment at all and talk about well, quite frankly, some real profound benefits that will result, assuming this motion passes this evening?
So, as we discussed last week at our work meeting, we had looked at, financial advisors are always constantly looking at our bonds and our debt to see if we can save any money. And our 2005 general obligation bonds were eligible, and we placed them in a direct placement and got a very attractive interest rate of 2.16%. And that will save the potential gross savings of $302,337 on that debt issuance.
Very, very good. Are there any comments or questions? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Are you able to answer my question?
Yes, I did.
Carl? Which,
So the chart that we looked at the work meeting in the back of the budget, that included this, that includes interest, which this is debt, these numbers that we're calculating is for the principal only, and it also includes this fiscal year's principal payment. So when you took off the interest out of those numbers and that, we tie back to this.
same document you just handed out, this one, and it has a principal and interest split out, so which one's up 2,500?
Yeah, we have to take that out. Subtract that out, and then you also have to
So it's really, it's a 2015, it's going to be 2016.
what part of the refunding will include the administration.
You clear on that, Mr. Gearbaugh?
Yeah, that's why when you looked at the numbers, what we're funding, I just wanted to make sure.
No. Perfectly appropriate. Good question. Anything else? Nothing further? Okay, it's pretty cut and dry. Well, it's been properly moved by Burgoyne, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar to approve and adopt and to authorize. The clerk will please call the roll.
Councilmember Burgoyne?
Yes.
Councilmember Gerbaugh?
Yes.
Councilmember Cyber-King?
Yes?
Councilmember Rhodes?
Yes.
Councilmember Roth?
Yes.
Councilmember Turner?
Yes.
Mayor Moore?
Yes. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Bennett and City Manager Campbell and our financial team for their work on this. It's greatly appreciated. We move on now to discussion items. First up is commission, committee, and task force reports from council members. Mr. Roth, I was hoping that maybe you'd talk a little bit about what's going to be happening this Saturday. Did I stump you?
Yes.
Substance abuse.
I'll defer that to you.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm happy to discuss that. As many of you are aware, and the chief, actually, maybe you can come up here and add some things that I'm sure I will forget. We are having a retreat this Saturday here in council chambers from, I think, approximately 8 until about noon with April Demers, who's our consultant, who has done substance abuse work throughout Monroe County and has also consulted with the city of Tecumseh to begin work on a strategic plan framework that I think we will eventually submit to the federal government and hopefully, knock on wood, achieve and receive a significant amount of funding to coordinate substance abuse activities and to pay a coordinator in the Saline community for, is it approximately the next 5 years if we qualify?
Next 5 years,
Yeah.
that's correct.
And so part of the goal for this strategic framework session on Saturday is to have a number of entities and organizations represented that aren't necessarily part of the existing task force. So we reached out to some folks in the healthcare sector. I think we have a judge or two coming. We have not the superintendent, but one of the assistant superintendents for Saline area schools who will also be attending and participating, as well as all the task force members. And then we've also extended an invitation to all of the subcommittee members. And one of the things that maybe the chief can talk a little bit more about, which will ultimately require the blessing of this legislative body, is we need to transition from a task force to a coalition. Do you want to talk maybe briefly about that?
Right. One of the things that April brought up when she talked with us is that federal funding for task force just does not happen. The only thing that they will fund are coalitions. And as a result of this, on Saturday, she's going to give us the guidelines on how to turn the task force into a coalition, and that's going to be purely for the funding that we'll be able to apply for that we cannot apply for as a task force. As the mayor said, additional people are going to be invited. A judge has been invited, assistant superintendent, deputy police chief from Pittsfield, because the high school is involved in the Pittsfield Township. And so the group is actually going to be a little bit bigger than what it was originally. And I think we're actually going to get better service as a result of having that many different occupations sitting around the table. And actually looking forward to it, especially when it happens on a Saturday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning. So there were some people that just weren't willing to be there, and other ones that said they'd be excited to be there because they know how big of a problem it really is.
So we hope for good results, and we'll certainly report back at our next council meeting. Mr. Burgoyne, did you have a question, sir?
In terms of the coalition, what comprises the coalition?
The coalition is going to be the 12 areas that need to be represented, law enforcement, medical, legal, education, those 12 areas, and I wish I could give all 12 of them to you, but I just don't have them in my mind at this point in time, will actually be the coalition, and they will then hopefully be able to connect with a 501c3, thank you, I always get that mixed up, 501c3, so they can apply for the funds. And that request has already been made, and once that happens, then we'll have a place in which to filter funds through as well.
But to simplify it, Mr. Burgoyne, because this legislative body established the task force, this legislative body will ultimately have to change the name. And then, as the chief said, probably add a few people to the group, just so that we have all of our bases covered and all the important organizations and individuals represented. How'd I do, Mr. Roth?
Excellent.
Good. Okay. Chief,
I
thank you.
plan to be there, but I just didn't look that far ahead in my calendar.
That's all right. That's all right. We look forward to seeing you bright and early at 8 a.m. on Saturday.
And there will be at least light refreshments for breakfast.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very light.
Coffee and cookies.
Are there any other commission, committee, or task force reports from council? No? How about reports or other announcements? Ms. Rhodes?
I did want to make one announcement, and that is I want to make sure that everybody in the audience and those who are viewing us on the tape realize that the last action item that we did just saved us over $300,000. So it was cut and dried and happened quickly here, but it happened that way because of a lot of effort that went on behind the scenes. And I want to thank the staff for bringing this to us.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. If there are no additional announcements, we'll move on to our last discussion item, which was added by Councilmember Burgoyne, which is resident feedback. Mr. Burgoyne?
Yeah, I have, I actually wrote it out, but I will give you the highlights. I wanted to provide some feedback from comments that I've heard over the past many weeks in talking to residents and business owners in the community. And the topic is how to achieve the most for the downtown. And I think that comes in terms of a variety of things. How to open up walkability on both sides from Hennyfield all the way to south of Henry Street. And I don't know that I'll go through it very much. I just give it to you in written form. But it seems to me that a lot of citizens in the neighborhoods don't actually come to government meetings. A lot of times you have, the interested parties that are nearby, or there's, if you're talking about the downtown, perhaps the shopkeepers will come. But I think residents, I did hear a lot of good ideas from elsewhere. And I also related this to Jeff Speck's Walkable Cities. I think in terms of doing something for the downtown, I hope that the council will think in more holistic term rather than just topic by topic by topic and just reacting to whatever the topic of the week is. So those are my comments.
Thank you. We appreciate you providing your thoughts in writing, Mr. Burgoyne. That's very helpful. If there's nothing further, we move on now to public comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments? No? Is there any other business to come before Saline City Council this evening? Just a reminder, we have a special work meeting next Tuesday, the 25th of November at 6:30 p.m. with our consultants from URS, as well as some representatives from the Michigan Department of Transportation to discuss the upcoming US 12 project. We then have our regular council meeting on the 1st with a work meeting at 6, followed by a regular meeting at 7:30. We do have our town hall meeting, which we discussed at our workshop last Friday, on the 3rd of December from 6 to 9 at the Liberty School cafeteria. We strongly encourage anyone who's interested in this community and its future to attend. I think it will be a great dialogue and a great discussion. We will be providing refreshments, and we were able to establish last Friday, we'll also be providing a door prize that will be raffled, or we'll do a drawing at the end. So everybody who attends and participates will be entered to win that. And I believe that's going to be a gift certificate through the Chamber of Commerce. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Wonderful. So can use it at a number of our great Saline businesses. And then we have our following council meeting, on the 15th with a work meeting at 6:30 and a regular meeting at 7:30. I do want to note, as it relates to our work meeting today, there were a number of people in attendance who had questions and concerns about the potential sale of our Monroe Street property that will be discussed at our next Planning Commission meeting on the 10th of December at 7 p.m. here in council chambers. And anyone who is interested in that potential sale and who would like to make comment or propose a question is strongly encouraged and welcome to attend. At this time, I would seek a motion to adjourn this meeting at 8:17 p.m. Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. All those in favor of adjourning at 8:17 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. This meeting's adjourned.